Well, let's end on the subject of Ukraine. Many people not aware that there's supposedly a Ukrainian counteroffensive that's been going on for several days now, but we thought it was time to give an update. My goodness, everything's in turmoil because it's not going to plan. Particularly horrible image and article from the Wall Street Journal here. Ukraine's offensive begins with ground gained, tanks lost. Well, no ground has been gained because that's been lost as well. But the picture of here is of Ukrainian wounded, and I find there's something about this picture, for me, it's deeply offensive. But basically, we've got Ukrainian wounded used to emotionally spin the disastrous progress of the Ukrainian offensive. The truth is the Ukrainian offensive has achieved nothing to date with huge casualties, but now we're focusing in on the wounded to hide the fact that the Ukrainians are already begging for tanks. There's something obscene about this. And I'm just going to put this in, so ram it home, negligible ground gained by the Ukrainians. Ground that they've gained, they've lost. It's been retaken and lost in some places several times, but they haven't moved off the start lines effectively, but they've lost a lot of armoured vehicles. I'm going to bring in this clip, which wouldn't play for me on Monday. Let's see if we're lucky. Now, obviously, this is drone footage, but what it's showing you is Ukrainian armoured vehicles that have broken cover in the offensive. They're having now to try and shelter themselves because they're being shelled and attacked with anti-tank weapons by the Russians. But here you see the vehicles clumping together to make an even bigger target, and the result is that even more of them are hit. This is truly incredible. Excuse me, you've got armoured vehicles milling around in the open in a field, and of course this makes them highly vulnerable to all of the weapons that the Russians could throw at them. And many military people saying to themselves what exactly was happening here, which allowed the Ukrainians to undertake these pitiful tactics. Now, it's spun by the Western media, CNN politics here. Ukrainian forces suffer stiff resistance and losses in assault on Russian lines. But the reality, as we'll see, is they haven't even got to the Russian lines. And the carnage is so phenomenal that even Forbes has to carry a front page picture. We've started to get Leopard tanks and Bradleys shown in that damage. If we come in a different angle, this is military.com, one of Ukraine's new US-equipped storm brigades spotted in the east. And in this very interesting article, a gentleman called Adrian Bonenberger says this. Now, I've paraphrased it. Go and read the article for yourself. The Russian video shows Ukrainian armour driving in single file across a field, hitting mines and getting stuck by artillery. I helped train Ukraine's 31st Separate Mechanized Brigade. Many of the men were in their 40s or older. A dozen were in their late 50s. This is truly pitiful that the West is doing this, forcing the Ukrainians to undertake this so-called offensive, and they're paying dearly for it. And then, of course, we've got the Kyiv Post here reporting, but I'm giving a thanks to HistoryLegends for flagging this up, and it caught my attention. But what it's saying is that the Ukraine's high command picked the 47th to be the second Army Brigade to be filled out primarily with green soldiers trained first in Britain, primarily by Commonwealth nation instructors. And what is so pitiful about that is, of course, that the British Army does not have the experience to fight against the type of war which is being conducted in Ukraine at the moment. And I think we're seeing that from the training, the Ukrainian soldiers are being utterly betrayed with the casualties on the battlefield. Now, of course, the BBC not reporting, but we've got other international sources are reporting on the reality. So this is the Hindustan Times. Kyiv has lost the West's mighty Leopards to these Russian drones. Well, most of the damage has been done by air attacks and shelling, but fair enough. And you have another one here, Mike.
Yeah, so the Bradley. So this is just a sarcastic comment put out by somebody on Twitter, and I just thought it was really relevant, because it said, "Sir, we have a problem with the Bradley, whose aluminium hulls are shredded like discarded beer cans, even their crews call them the death traps. The solution is to send the stockpile of Bradleys to Ukraine and soak taxpayers for the full cost of replacements, then buy something else." So the Bradleys have been complained about for quite some time. So this is just wanted to highlight this, because it makes the point, quite rightly, that we are just sending all our rubbish over to Ukraine for it to be blown up across the Ukraine countryside by the Russians. And then, of course, our military-industrial complex moves in behind and sells more modern material back into the US and the UK.
Yeah. Right, well, just to give people a picture of what's happening, and a big thanks to History Legends. I try and use different sources when I give these reports, but there are many very, very good commentators and analysts out there. This was a particularly good graphic, so I'm going to give credit to History Legends. But this is showing in red the main Russian defense lines, and you can see that it's defense in depth. And the blue arrows are indicative of intended lines of attack by the Ukrainians. This certainly doesn't show that the Ukrainians have penetrated right through to the third layer of Russian defense. In fact, the Ukrainians have been held right on the front line, where, yes, they have captured some villages, but then they've invariably lost them a few days later. And the thing to remember is that the Russians have established pickets on the front line. They alert forces to attacks. They will conduct their own attacks, but then they vacate the area. The main Russian defense is some 17 kilometers behind the front line, and that forms a killing zone. That's how the tanks and other equipment were destroyed. But behind that, we've got the second defense line and the third defense line. And if we choose a different provider, this is military summary. Here we can see the Russian defenses as the black dots, but we can see from the blue arrows that it's actually only right on the front line that this conflict is taking place. And in most of the settlements, they've been cleared of civilians by the Russians some time ago. The BBC, of course, attempted to turn this into propaganda by saying that the Russian clearance of civilians from the villages was mad panic. And they added in this particular article, trying to say that with the civilians, Russian troops were running away as well, which was complete nonsense. So the truth of the matter is that many casualties on the Ukrainian side, casualties on the Russian side as well, but no penetration into those Russian defences by the Ukrainians. BBC is silent, of course, but we'll just end with this, which is, how do we know things have gone badly? Well, this is European Pravda. Ukraine asked Germany for more Leopard 2 tanks. And why are they asking? Well, because the tanks are being destroyed at an extremely high rate, particularly the Bradley infantry fighting vehicles. But here we go round the boy again, asking the West for more weapons to keep this obscene war going. So we'll end on a note that UK column is here for peace. We want to see peace in Ukraine, but until the West stops providing arms, we're not going to see an end to that peace anytime soon. So pretty appalling stuff. We better end there. I'll say to everybody, thank you very much for joining us wherever you are in the world. Please, if you're a UK column subscriber, stay with us for extra time, because we promised today to give you our update on good news for the UK column. And we will be back in a few moments. So thank you very much for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.